Did you enjoy that extra hour of sleep? 5 of you? Oh, man, I did. That was great. I loved it. Good to see you. Welcome. My name is Troy. I'm one of the pastors here, and grateful that you joined us here in person, also online. Thanks for coming out. Hey, this week was a fun week. We had a great, just a great event downtown with the Halloween stroll on Tuesday. I want to thank all of you who helped volunteer. God, we had 30 or 40 volunteers helping us set up, and just a lot. The costume contest was awesome, and the whole hot chocolate stand and all that. We saw thousands of people, got to meet and love on and say hello to so many people, and the costumes are so creative. I saw many of you out there representing. Great to be a part of that. Great to be a part of our community. Good to see you out there doing that. So I'm not going to waste any time. I want to get into this new series that we're starting, and I thought I would start it off by maybe just kind of seeing if you've ever gone through something like I went through this week, if you've ever had this happen to you before. Maybe you ever been driving around like on a crowded street or in a parking lot, and you're looking for a parking space, but it just seems like nobody is willing to give you their spot. I mean, it just seems like everything's closing off. You ever felt that? Yeah, well, on Tuesday night, I came down to the downtown a little late, and man, I had to drive around and around and around looking for a spot. I couldn't find anything. But it's funny, right after I prayed, hey, God, could hook me up a spot, I come around a corner, and here's this dude coming out of a store and gets right into his car. And I'm like, that's my one. So I instantly pull up real quick, and I kind of get up so he knows that I'm there and he knows that I'm interested. And I flip on my little turn signal, which is the international sign for I got dibs on this space. It's mine. Back off, all that. And so I'm sitting there and I'm waiting, for him, and I'm waiting. And I'm waiting. You know what I'm talking about? I'm like, what's going on? He's not moving like he should be. And it just seems like he's doing everything but giving me my space, right? I mean, I can see him kind of adjusting the mirrors a little bit. Looks like he's kind of playing with the stereo. I'm almost sure that I saw him on the phone. I couldn't tell if he was playing Candy Crush or if he's like on Instagram or checking it. I'm like, come on, man. Either way, you got to move. Get out of the way. And I'm thinking, as this just kind of goes on and on, is he had to see me. He knows I'm right here. I'm hawking on him, right? And I begin to think, is he purposely taking his time just to irritate me? Right? You ever felt that way? You're just like, you're doing this you're doing a thing. And so I did what any man of God would do. I got out of my truck and I went right over to him and I knocked on the window. And he looked up at me, and then he rolled down his window. He didn't roll down. It wasn't a 77 LeSabre or something else. He hits the thing down. He comes down, and he looks at me, and no joking, he goes, "Hey, Pastor Troy." So I have to quickly audible, because I can't say what I was going to say. And I'm like, "Hey, Parishioner Joe. Good to see you, man. I just thought I'd come over and say hi and see if God is moving you in a direction anywhere. God is moving in your life in a new way." And so it's just awkward, and we talked, and he's like, "Hey, man, you want my spot?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, man." So, just dumb. And so, but I'm wondering if that experience, not the being a bully, but, wanting a space has ever happened to you, right? I think, here's the truth. I found this out. That is actually a thing. According to the Journal of Applied Psychologists, they studied over 100 drivers, hundreds of drivers, more than that, and they found this, that most people actually take longer to move out of a parking space if they know that there's someone there waiting for it. People do that. Do you do that? You lie. You get in the car. I do. I get in there and I like see, oh, you want this space? Get in the mirror, check it out. I just take my time. There's something about, you're going to have to earn this space, baby. I look for it for 15 minutes. And so people are crazy like that. And I think that we all kind of have a part of that. But here's the thing I was thinking about. I don't know about you, but I often find this phenomenon to happen in my relationship with God, right? There are times when I'm aware that God is kind of right there, and he's tapping me on the shoulder a little bit, and he's waiting for me. He's got his turn signal on, and he's trying to get my attention. And he just wants me to give him a little space in my life for him. But I sometimes just act like I don't see him, and I just kind of ignore it. I know that this, happens with all of us sometimes, and I do it more than I want. And so here's the thing. That's what this series is all about. This idea is that this month we're going to look at 4 words that I think will help us create some more space for God to move in our lives. We're calling it 4 words that can change your life. And I know that sounds, a lot like one of those late night infomercials where they're promising more than they can deliver. But I promise you, if you will learn to say this word or these words more often, they can literally change your life for the better. If you can learn how to implement these in your life better, they will change it. I just want to warn you that they're hard to say. These aren't easy words. Some of you have been trying to guess what they are, and these are harder words for us to say. But if you can learn to say them more often, you'll create opportunities for God to move into and through your life, and your life will be better. I promise you that will happen. And so today, I'm going to start off with the first word. It's going to be a letdown, but I hope that you roll with me because I think it'll help you. It's a tough word, as I said, but here we go. Today's word is no. No. I know it's awkward to start with that. You're like, wah, kind of negative. But in our busy 100-mile-an-hour lives that you and I are doing and going, this word can be incredibly important. And so I just thought it would be good. Let's just say it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. No. Ooh, the atmosphere just changed, right? There's something about that word. When you hear it, there's an emotional response that we get when we hear that word, and it's not a good response. Usually, it's not a positive one. We've all heard that word used before, and it's often a bummer for us when we hear it. It's, hey, do you like me? No. Oh, okay. Or do you think I might get a raise this year? No. Or how about this one? Do you want to go out on a date with me? No. I heard that a lot, man. You can imagine how I was running around the middle school asking everybody to go out. No, heard no a lot. Or here's one for you. Think about this one. Hey, do you think that these jeans make me look fat? Guys, what's the answer to that? Always. No, of course not. And so we just need to acknowledge that there's something negative about no. No has a negative vibe. And hearing the word no often feels like a dead end or kind of a slap in the face to us. And so because of that, many of us have a hard time saying it. We try to avoid that. We want to be seen as good people, good person. We don't want to be seen as a negative person. We don't want to be seen as a grump. And so we don't say no maybe as much as we should, I think. But here's the thing I was thinking about. It wasn't always that way in our lives. There was a time in our lives when we very naturally and very easily said no all the time, and we never felt bad about it. Remember being a little kid? They're like, hey, are you going to eat your vegetables? No. You going to go clean your room? No. You going to share your toy with your sister? No. We just said it. We loved saying it. We had no problem with it. There was no guilt that came about it. We just, no. Deal with it, and that's how we left it. But somewhere along the way, maybe in middle school or high school, we figured that people actually liked us better if we said yes, right? We learned that we were more popular when we said yes, and we were able to make friends easier and hold them longer when we said yes. And this is true if you really wanted, and like that boy, and you wanted him to like you, or like that girl, and you wanted her to like you, or that group, you would say yes to some things that you probably knew you should say no to. And it worked for you in the immediate, but not in the long term. And so I just want to be clear, I am not down on the word yes at all. Yes is a really great word, and there are plenty of times when we should say it, and no doubt. But I also think that, and in fact, I'm going to talk about one of those times that we should say yes in just a minute, but I just want to be clear. The problem isn't with the word yes. The problem is when you and I are saying yes to the wrong things, and yes to the wrong people, and yes for the wrong reasons. That's what I'm talking about. And that's where the power of no can really be harnessed in our lives when we kind of look at those areas. And so now I know that in church and as Christians, yes should be a part of our vernacular. I think for a lot of us, we've sort of misunderstood what it means to be a Christian or it means to be a follower of Christ. We think it is someone who always says yes, right? A Christian is always available. A Christian is always willing to do whatever other people ask them to do. But that's not necessarily true. Jesus didn't always say yes to some of these things, and it's not a healthy way to live your life. Always saying yes when you really want to say no will eventually lead to resentment, right? You'll begin to just kind of grind the gears, you become resentful, and that eventually leads to burnout. Eventually you're just like, I'm done, I'm numb to this. And I've seen that happen in churches. I've seen it in friendships and in marriages, right? People, they keep saying yes when they mean no, and they get resentful about it, and then they burn out. And then what they do is they simply bail out. They disappear. And they're gone. And so we need to learn to say no. Now, if we learn to say no a little more often, here's one of the benefits that come from that. It creates a little bit of space and a little more margin in our lives, which is a good thing. We could use a little bit more margin, a little more fluff, a little more time in our life. Space and margin often is refreshing to us. It feels good. You can breathe. And you can like, okay, I'm all right, right? And that allows us time to get wisdom. See, I'm making decisions, split decisions all the time, and I'm not always using decision. I'm using my instincts, or I'm just out of repetition, some things. But wisdom, one of the definitions I use for wisdom is looking at my life from God's point of view rather than my point of view. God can see miles ahead and years ahead, and He can see the whole thing, and He has a better perspective. And wisdom, when I can get wisdom, I can get God's perspective on my life and where I'm headed, and that's good. And when I get wisdom, I begin to see a little more clearly where God is leading me and taking me and the things that He has in store for me. And when I follow that, I find more fulfillment and joy and peace in my life. And so, no. It's interesting, the word no is actually a biblical word. Never thought about it. It's a holy word. It's a good word. All throughout the Bible, you'll see example after example of God's people saying no to certain things and certain people in their lives. Let me give you a couple examples, some that maybe you haven't thought about. In the first chapter of Esther, Old Testament book, we're introduced to a woman who became known as Queen Vashti. Queen Vashti was married to Xerxes, who was the king of Persia. And Xerxes had just thrown, in the first chapter there, we're told that he throws this massive party for all of his officials, his military leaders, all his bigwigs. And while he's doing that, Queen Vashti's got a little, ladies' brunch down in her wing of the palace. At some point, Xerxes' party starts to go off the rails. The music starts pumping, and people are like, yeah, and the drinks start flowing. And pretty soon, Xerxes is trashed out of his mind. He's drunk. And so he texts her, sends a message, never drink and text. He texts Vashti, and he says, hey, babe, come on up to the party, man. I want you to dance for my friends. And in the original language, there's something that hints that this is a twisted request that he's making, that there's something funky to it. And you can just guess what her reply was. In verse 12, chapter 1, it says this: when they conveyed the king's order to the queen to come up, she refused to come. She's like, no way. No, I'm not going to do that. And the next verse tells us what happened, that made the king furious, and he burned with anger. That's the problem with saying no, is we disappoint people. In fact, he took away her crown from her. And so her no cost her something, but she stuck to her guns. She knew that was the right thing for her. Another example is in chapter 1 of Daniel. Daniel, there's a different king in this one, Nebuchadnezzar. He had just attacked Jerusalem, and he took some young Jewish boys, young men, the best and the brightest, back to Babylon, and he kind of puts them in this program that he wants to kind of indoctrinate them into the ways of the Babylonian life, and he changes their names, Belshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know those guys, all that story, and he puts them on a special regiment and a special diet. And in verse 8, it tells us this. It says that Daniel resolved not to defile himself by eating food and wine given to him by the king. In other words, Daniel was like, no, I'm not going to eat that. I'm a Jewish boy. I've got things. I'm not going to do that. And that led to him getting thrown in the lion's den, some other things. And my point is, in both of those stories, that saying no wasn't easy for them because of the immediate consequences were hard. But in the end, if you read those stories out, you'll see that God blessed and used their no's for good. He used their actions for good. Now, here's where I want to land. One of my favorite examples is a guy by the name of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah was from Jerusalem. He too had been kind of kidnapped and taken back to another country. And one day he learns that his hometown, Jerusalem, had been attacked and destroyed. And he was heartbroken. I mean, just devastated. But rather than sit around and sob about it, he did something about it. Nehemiah was a leader. It's a great book on leadership. If you read it, just watch how he approaches it. And so he gathers a team. He gets some people. He gets some resources. He goes to the king, and he gets permission from the king to be able to go back and rebuild the city of Jerusalem. But as with most big projects, there was some opposition against him and to what he was doing. And in chapter 6 of Nehemiah, verse 1, it tells us a little bit about this. This is Nehemiah speaking. He's like, I want to tell you, this guy by the name of Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, don't sound like nice guys to me, and the rest of our enemies learned that I had finished rebuilding the wall and that there were now no gaps in the wall around Jerusalem. But we hadn't yet quite got the gates put in, or the doors put into the gates there. And he goes on. He says, so Sanballat and Geshem sent a message asking me to meet with them at one of the villages in the plain of Ono. Everybody say, oh no. This is not probably a good thing. And he recognized it. He says this, but I realized that they were actually trying to plot to harm me. This seems like an ordinary, nice request. Hey, let's go have coffee over in Ono. But Nehemiah senses that there's more to this than meets the eye. He senses that they're trying to distract him and to pull him away from his passion, from his calling, from this thing that God has for him. Now, fortunately for Nehemiah, apparently he had enough margin and space in his life to step back and to discern what was really happening here. I want you to look at what he says here. He says, so I replied by sending this message to him. I'm engaged in a great work, so I cannot come. And besides, why should I stop working to come meet with you ding-dongs? Wow, that was a little in your face. I don't know about you, but that strikes me a little aggressive, right? Nehemiah is coming at them pretty strongly here. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not coming. Now, if you're a type A person, and you get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, you do more before 8 than the rest of us do the rest of the day. You love how he responded. This seems natural and easy. Yeah, that's right. Dang right. He gets a request to have some meeting that has no purpose to it. That's a waste of time. Tell him to buzz off, Nehemiah. Exactly. Some of you are exactly like that, and that's how you roll. But for many of us who are, maybe you don't like conflict, you like to schmooze a little bit, or you want to keep the peace, it just seems like Nehemiah's reply here is a little abrupt, and it just feels wrong, right? I mean, you're like, how can he be so rude about this? And it's not that you can't see why Nehemiah might say no. It's just that he doesn't really give a good reason for not being there, which a lot of us feel like we have to add when we say no and go through a long thing. And so I just want to ask you a question. Regardless of how you're wired, whichever way, I want to throw this question out and just kind of make sure that we're all on the same page. Think about this. You don't have to raise your hand. In your life, have you ever regretted saying yes to something or someone when what you really wanted to say was no? Some of you are like, yes, emphatically, yes, I have. He's sitting right next to me. No, I don't. I'm not talking about those small little things. I'm talking about like, when you're at the register, you're at the counter, and there's a clerk in the register, and they're like, hey, would you like to join our rewards program? And you're like, yes. And then for the rest of your life, you're like, why did I do that? I get emails all the time. I'm not talking about small stuff. I'm talking about big stuff. Like you said yes when you felt you should say. Like maybe one time you went to a job interview, and they talked to you, and man, right, even before the interview was over, they instantly offered you the job. And you really hadn't had a chance to process. And they were like, do you want it? And there was something inside of you. There's an alarm going, no. And you kind of wanted to say no. But, you said yes anyway. Because they were offering you the job on the spot. And you kind of felt honored. And so you were like, yes. Right? You didn't want to let them down. And it turned out to be a disaster. You regretted that. Wasted a few weeks or months of your life because of that. Or maybe someone asked you to marry him. Right? And you were shocked and you're surprised because you're like, this is way too early to talk about marriage. But they were so into it and they were so sincere and you just didn't want to let them down. So you said, yes, right? I'm sure there are times in all of our lives where we said yes to something that we wanted to say no to, but for whatever reason, yes came out of our mouths instead. Why is that? I think there are a lot of reasons. I think one reason, some of us are people pleasers, right? We just have this little people pleaser inside of us, and we don't want to let anyone down. I don't want you to make me feel bad about me. I think there's others of us that are desperate for affirmation. We just are hungry for just kudos, and so if we say yes, we get some kudos, and that kind of fills a little need that we have. I think others are just kind of living their life aimlessly. They don't really have a vision for their life, or they don't have a purpose and meaning. And so anything that comes along, they take it. Just because, he says that he likes you doesn't mean that you should date him, right? I mean, that's not automatic. There's a little bit more that goes into that. And I think that's what people are just looking. I'm just looking for something. And so I think that, or FOMO for a lot of people, fear of missing out. What could happen if I don't do this? I don't know. But here's the thing. We need to realize that we're not guaranteed with any of the options that we make that are the right decision. Nehemiah wasn't. I mean, he couldn't have known with 100% certainty what his enemies' intentions were or what they were trying to do. But I love this. Nehemiah had enough margin in his life, built into his life, that he could operate with some discernment and with some wisdom. And he must have thought about it. And I think he prayed about it. And at the end, he said, hey, I don't think that that's right for me. So thank you, but no, thank you. And I think it saved him a lot of trouble. And we see that his discernment was correct. If you read the story, they just keep coming after him. In verse 4, it says that 4 times they sent the same message to him over and over. And each time he said, I just gave him the same answer. Talk to the hand, talk to the hand. And it's clear that they're trying to wear him down. And he just keeps saying no, no, no. And then the 5th time, next verse, it says the 5th time, Sanballat's servant, they tried a new tactic. Sent a servant, came up with an open letter, make it look all official, and he read it. He said, there is a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me that it is true. In other words, whatever Geshem says is true, must be true. Geshem says it's true. That you and the Jews are planning a rebellion. And that's why you're rebuilding this wall. And according to his reports, you plan on becoming king. You're doing a thing here. He also reports that you've appointed prophets in Jerusalem to go around proclaiming proclaim that about you. Hey, look, there's now a king in Judah. Come on, everybody, right? And verse 7, he makes a threat. He says, you can be very sure that this report is going to get back to your king, so I suggest that you come and talk to me now. I mean, he is making some threats, some dramatic statements, and he's trying to manipulate Nehemiah and get him to react to say, okay, yes, I will do what you want. Now, here's the thing. There's something I know about you and me, all of us. Every one of us has a Sanballat in our life. There might even be several that you have. And they might not necessarily be your enemy. They might be, but they might mean well. They might be people that mean well in your life, but they know how to manipulate you. It could be a needy friend that you have that, it just seems like they're always taking and always asking from you, but never giving anything back. And you just see that pattern. Or maybe it's a coworker that you have, and you just sense that they're being nice to you only so that they can use you to get ahead. Or maybe it's your kids. They know your soft spot, and they're constantly working you to get what they want. Or perhaps it's your grown kids, right? And they're constantly asking you for stuff that they themselves should be taking care of, right? And again, they may mean well. There's no nefarious stuff, but they just seem to know what to say to coerce you into saying yes when you kind of feel like it's time to say no. They'll say things like, a lot of people feel this way, and we just thought that you should know. We've heard people say things, and you should know. Or they say things like, well, okay, I guess we'll just have to find another way to do it on our own. And you always end up saying yes, because in those moments you don't want to experience the short-term pain of saying no. And they know that. They know it. And they are robbing you of your discernment and of your ability to live wisely. And this is going to lead to resentment and ultimate rejection at some point. It's going to blow up. And so here's the thing. I want to just look at how Nehemiah replied to that last letter. Verse 8, he says, I replied, there is no truth in any part of your story. You are making this whole thing up. And then he tells us, he says, they were just trying to intimidate me. They were imagining that they could discourage me so that they could stop this work. But I continued to do the work with even greater determination. I decided to double down on this because I know I'm in the right spot. Nehemiah saw right through it, and he calls him out. He's like, look, I know what you're doing. And I'm not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe thing again, buddy. I'm not going to, I've done it before, but that's it. I'm not going to do it anymore. And again, depending on your personality, that may seem abrupt and hard for you to respond like that to people in your life. And if you have a hard time saying no to certain people, I just want to give you one little phrase that maybe you can use. Write it down on a little 3x5, put it in your pocket, and when this comes out, you can pull it out and just read it. And this will help you. This will help the situation. It'll help you kind of set the boundary. Here it is. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Put it up there. I'm not available right now. I can't help you right now. In fact, let's all say that together. 1, 2, 3. I'm not available right now. I wish I could, but I can't. And I like this because there's a big difference between saying no, forever, no, and no, but not right now, or no, right now. I'll think about it. Because saying that gives you a little time to seek some wisdom and discernment in your life, and you ought to try this. Next time they come to you with a problem, and they're saying, hey, you just need to say, hey, I really wish I could help. But I'm not available right now. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I got this thing. In fact, you will be tempted to explain and to justify why you don't have time. And I would suggest you don't. Just say, man, I really wish I could, but I can't right now. Period. Leave it right there. Because that'll buy you some time to process, pray, and discern what the best course of action might be in that situation. Now, I need to caution you real quick. You need to use some intelligence about how you use this. For example, if you're coming home this week, from work, and your wife texts you and says like, hey, can you stop at the store and pick up some marinara sauce on your way home? Don't text her back and say, I'm not available right now, period. And by the way, Pastor Troy says, I don't need to justify this. Click. I'm washing my hands publicly of that whatever issue that you're doing. My point is that there are just some times that you can't use that. Your boss gave you a deadline, and you get to the deadline, you can't pull out I'm not available to finish. No, not those times. But there are times where this will create some space for you to process and to think and to look and seek for God's will in your life. And this is important that we do some of this. And here's why. I have discovered in my life there is a small group of people where about 99% of the time, my answer to them needs to be yes. I mean, sometimes, but most of the time it's yes. And I also realize that there's a larger group of people that, yes, I need to say yes to them, but sometimes my answer needs to be no, I just can't, and I won't. Why do I do that? Here's why. So I can say, I say no to some people so that I can say yes to that first group. Those people that are the priority in my life. Like a way to look at this would be like if your life is like a bullseye. And in those circles or concentric circles are just levels of people. And the closer you get to the center of that, the more you probably, the person that's in the center that you need to say yes to, right? At the center of that bullseye is probably your spouse, your children, your best friends, the core group in your life. But as and in fact, I would say this: at the very center of that bullseye, for some of us, is Jesus. And you definitely need to say yes to him every time, right? But we'll get to that in a second. But as you move away from the center, you've got to prioritize your yeses and your nos a little bit. Why? Because it wouldn't be good if you had to say no to the right people because you kept saying yes to the wrong people. You don't want to do that. And I think that we do that a lot, not only with people, with things. There are things that you need to say yes to in your life, but because the right things, but you keep saying yes to the wrong things, and you're missing out. And I think a lot of us do that. So think about that. Now, let me just finish this story, this passage, and then we'll come to a conclusion. Verse 11, it says this. Nehemiah says, "Later, I went to visit Shemaiah, son of Delaiah and grandson of Mehetabel, and who was confined to his home. And he told me, he said, 'Hey, let's get together. But let's meet inside the temple of God.'" That is a no-no. Not everybody gets together. "Let's meet inside the temple of God and bolt those doors shut." That's a red flag, right? He's like, "Hey, your enemies are out there. We got enemies. They're wanting to kill you. You should lock yourself in the church." And look at what Nehemiah says. He says, "Should someone in my position run from danger? Should someone in my position enter the temple to save his life? No. I won't do that. This would be wrong. I won't do that." And in verse 12, he tells us, he says, "I realized that God had not been speaking to them." This isn't from God. I had time. I realized. I had margin in my life, and I realized this isn't God. But that he had uttered his prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. They'd coerced him, and they were hoping to intimidate me and make me sin. And then they'd be able to accuse me and discredit me, and I'd lose everything. Once again, Nehemiah discerned that there was some manipulation going on here, and he had decided in his heart nothing was going to deter him from what God had called him to do. Nothing was going to pull him away from that which was most important in his life. In fact, I love how he ends this whole thing in verse 14. He tells you and I, he writes us in this letter, he says, "I want you to remember what Tobiah and Sanballat have done and how they tried to intimidate me." They just kept trying and trying. And here's the thing you need to know. The wall was completed in 52 days on the 25th of Elul, or July, or whatever. In other words, I didn't get distracted. I finished the work that God gave me. I finished this dream and this passion that I had. I didn't let him distract me. And so, I say all of that to say to you today, the first word that you and I need to learn to say a little more often in our lives is no. No. Saying no will set you and I free from the things and the people that are trying to control us and manipulate us and distract us. We need to discernment in that. And saying no will give you some time and create some space and margin to discern God's best for your life. And so this week, I just want to challenge. Each week we're going to do this. I want to challenge you this week to say no. Or to say no, not right now, to something that you often say yes to. Just as a practice, as a discipline, to create more space in your life, to say no to something so that you can say yes to something later, right? To say no so you can have a little margin in your life and feel what that's like. Right? Now, some of you, just thinking about it tenses you up. You're like, oh my God. if I say no, I might miss out on something, or they're going to be so angry with me if I say no to them. Some of you are thinking about that. But this is good practice. This is good. It's setting these boundaries. It's a discipline. As disciples, we are to discipline ourselves. And here's the thing. We must learn to say no more often so that we can say yes to the thing that are most important in our life. And I think that a lot of us are trading good for great. Right? We're doing some good things, but there's greatness that God has for us. And so I just want to close with giving you a thought of how to know what to say yes to in your life and how to know what to say no to. Go back to the bullseye. The bullseye, at the center of that bullseye for many of us is Jesus. And I have found when I put Jesus first in my life, in any area of my life, in my relationships, in my time, in my finances, when I put him first in my decisions, I'm blessed. Good things happen. And when I put him first in my decision-making process, here's what I find. I find clarity and confidence. Whenever I ask him, hey, Jesus, what should I do in this situation? I get clarity. I begin to kind of see things a little different. He doesn't tell me exactly what to do all the time, but it sure does narrow it down. A lot of the fluff and the distractions and all that, literally I'm left with 2 or 3 things rather than 40. Because I know Jesus' heart. I know what he's into. And so I have clarity. And then the second thing is that I have confidence. Following Jesus gives me the confidence to take that step to say no or to say yes, knowing that Jesus is going to be with me either way. I think about Peter. He's in the boat. There's a storm. He sees Jesus on the water. He says, Jesus, if that's really you, tell me to come to you. And tell me come. And Jesus says, yes, come. And Peter hears that one word, and he steps out, and he walks on the water. And what gave him confidence to that was a word from Jesus. And Jesus was with him. And when Peter sunk, Jesus was with him, pulled him out. And so you can have confidence that God is going to be with me, come hell or high water, whatever happens on the other side of this decision. And so the funny thing about this little no thing that I'm doing right now with you is that I'm really trying to get you to a place where you will say yes to Jesus more often in your life. Because that's where good stuff happens, right? Jesus said, I am the way. I'm the best way. I am the truth, and I am the life. And consulting him first in your life, pausing and asking him will make sure that you're on the best path, that you're living the deepest, best truth, and that you are living the kind of life that you're genuinely longing for. And so again, I just want to ask this week and challenge you to take a little extra moment this week to pause and to ask him, should I or shouldn't I? Yes or no? Just ask, and he'll direct you. Let's just allow Jesus some extra room to pull into the parking space of our heart. Let him be there. And I believe that if you do, I promise you, you'll begin to sense God's will unfolding in your life, and there's nothing better than that. Okay? So that's our first word. Let's try that this week, and we'll come back and look at the next one. Let me pray, and we'll get you out of here. Father, we come this morning. I'm mindful that people got up this morning, got dressed, cleaned up, and came to church. And maybe this wasn't the message they needed, but we come to you now and we open our hearts and we ask that you would help us. Because this is so hard for us today to know what to say yes and no to. There's so many options. It's hard to know what to say yes and what to say no to. But here's what the Gospels say. The Gospels say that Jesus only did what the Father told him to do. Jesus had a big job, a lot of responsibility, save the world. And yet I don't see him running around doing everything. He was saying yes and no to certain things and certain people. And clearly it says that he only did what the Father told him to do. And so I pray you'd help us to do the same. Help us to hear your voice clearly, and help us to confidently step out, and help us to create some space now in our hearts and our lives for you to guide us and direct us. And help us to just stop saying yes to anything. Help us to say no to the inconsequential things of this world and to say yes to the things of your kingdom.